Welcome to Mogobe Nuggets of Wisdom podcast. My name is Mompoloki Lerumo Mogobe. Our objective is to enthuse, inspire, energize, and empower entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs of all stripes here in BW and beyond. We do so by inviting these entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs into our makeshift studio. Sometimes we call them to the restaurant, sometimes we go to our studio, and we ask them to share their experiential knowledge, their experiences and their expertise, and we ask them as many questions as we can, aimed at empowering you also as a viewer. Hello dear viewer, dear listener, my name is Mompoloki Lerumo Mogobe. I welcome you once again to another invigorating, challenging episode of Mogobe Nuggets of Wisdom. I brought to the studio a media practitioner of some repute, Mr. Gabriel Rasengwatshe, and he's going to talk about jobs and job creation, among other things. And allow me to shift over to you, Mr. Rasengwatshe, to you, so you can formally introduce yourself to our listeners.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
My full names, amongst the 7 names I have, I've picked 2. Gabriel Rasengwatshe, known as Gabriel widely because I cannot take it personal when I'm called Galebo.
Okay.
So I can understand why there are too many Galebohas, and that's fine. So Gabriel is just fine.
I think even your surname sometimes is butchered. I think I may have butchered it saying Rasengwatshe.
Yes.
Rasengwatshe.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Tell us a little bit about your background, professionally speaking.
I have just completed my tenure as GabsFM station manager. A very amazing trip, if you will. Didn't expect it when it was announced, but I took it nonetheless for the virtue of learning. It was incredible. It was an incredible experience to run a national company that everybody knows, and to not just run it, to reorganize it, which is one key element of what I do, business reorganization. I'm an ideation to profit strategist. In other words, I can start, after assessing your situation, I can develop ideas that lead to profit, mainly because I believe so much in capitalism, free market capitalism even. And to me, that is the answer to the many challenges we are currently facing. And maybe we will have an opportunity to go
when
into
you talk
those.
about
Yes.
believe in the capitalist system, I think the two of us are steeped in that, in the free market type of thinking. But professionally, in terms of training, degrees, diplomas, what have you got?
Yeah, I went to the University of Botswana. I was mightily disappointed the first time I got there because I had a different perspective of what a university is. I thought that a university should be the whole library to you. You get to, that's where you get to learn pretty much everything. But I settled for business administration, but I would still go into the library to go and expand what I knew, and I got interested in things like philosophy and even extensive literature that got me interested in other things beyond what I was doing, economics, finance, and that's how I got to be where I am with the ideas that I have today.
Wonderful. And we're going to talk about jobs, isn't it?
Absolutely.
And that's what Botswana needs. Can you just underscore the importance of and the meaning of action for jobs?
Yes, action for jobs is 2 things. The first aspect is an answer to government's call for the private sector to do something in helping government develop jobs. In fact, in a capitalist free market society, government shouldn't be begging for entrepreneurs, business people to create jobs. It should be a given. But the last 3 administrations, starting with the administration Yagarre Masisi, going to Yagarre Kama, going even before that Yagarre Mukhai, they have repeatedly asked the private sector to participate fully. So the idea of impacting our society by mobilizing the business community to come together and form an alliance for the creation of jobs came as a result of me understanding that business is about impact. And so when running GabsFM, it became abundantly clear that media businesses were not investing enough in the media and creative sector. They were just taking and taking. And I had a problem with that because that's not what business is to me. Business must impact lives. Yes, must impact top lines. But at the same time, those top lines come from the market. So
top lines and the bottom line as well.
Yeah, I prefer top lines.
Yes,
It's more exciting there.
What is the difference for those who might not know?
Well, the bottom line, you worry too much about the cents, if you will, about the teves.
Yes.
But top lines, you want to worry more about the 200 pullers. You know, that's where expansion is. That is where growth is. And the bottom line, you want to pinch. You want to reduce, you want to cut. And that's what we've been doing for a little over a decade. And our economy is grinding to a halt because of that, because we are concentrating too much on the teves when we could be making.
That sounds very exciting, but a skeptic out there might say, what gives Gabriel the right to talk about this? What would you say has really grounded you to feel that this is something you want to share with the nation?
It's the second part of what my point. Other than government making a call to the private sector and me being a private citizen and a private business person, it makes sense for us to show our depth. We are perhaps the first generation business people in this country. We come from an agrarian past. It's still steeped, we're still steeped in agriculture. Even now, a lot of people are running into agriculture. However, we need to move past our fear of lack of food. The scarcity mentality has to die. I understand where it comes from. We come from poverty, a lot of us, for obvious reason. And bread beans are things that we are beginning to appreciate now. And every time you come in and you open the bread bin and it's about to empty and you are worried. But we will never get into an innovative space if we are still worried about food. And
so are you
that's
saying
where
there's
we
also
are.
need for a mindset shift from scarcity to abundance?
It's absolutely overdue because there is so much that we could do if we entered the space of abundance, because then you will not worry about certain things that you have as problems currently. Problems will always be there. Life is tough, and you can't make it any tougher by worrying about it. So perhaps you should worry more about the solutions to get out of your quagmire. And I think at times we take it lightly that it's on us and we need to get up and do something about it. Personal growth is also part of economic growth. If we don't all do something in our personal space, the economy is not going to work for any of us at all.
Let me ask you about the real problem, because the doctor says before they prescribe a medicine, they have to first diagnose the ailment or the disease. What is the extent of unemployment in Botswana? Because the numbers keep shifting, the different categories, youth unemployment, general unemployment. Can you just put this discussion to rest and give us an idea as to what the reliable numbers are?
Well, if we rely on Statistics Botswana, those are the most reliable numbers because they have the wherewithal to actually compile the data. But they are putting unemployment figures just under 25%, I think about 20% in 2018. And the numbers have since become a political issue, because then there are those who point out that things like ipelering are not employment. They perhaps are right to a large extent. But the wider issue is much more the setup of our system currently. Our system is making it harder and harder for us to create employment because it is becoming much more a social system. And welfare has never really built an economy to be vibrant. And it's not about to do that in Botswana. We are not an amazing economy. We are not an amazing case where all of a sudden welfare will distribute wealth. It doesn't do that.
We're essentially a welfare state.
Yeah, we are now. We are now. Under Remukhai, not so much. But where we are now is we are taking from someone to give to someone, but that's not bringing anything new. And that is where the problem is. And that will continuously obfuscate the numbers of unemployment because they get lost in the language of welfare.
And of course, youth unemployment is of great interest. How is youth unemployment compared to general unemployment?
Well,
the situation in Botswana.
It's simple. You look at the numbers of those that are walking out of college and university. In the last decade, we have seen an astronomical number of youth walk out of universities and colleges, 50,000 by 2018. That is large. So if you're having 50,000 youth come out of university every year, you can imagine what happens. How many did we have in the last 10 years?
And so that's not just, those are the youth who went to university.
Yes.
What about the youth who couldn't make it, which is the big majority?
Yes.
They couldn't make it to varsity.
So you can already see that we are sitting on a keg here, and it is going to be a problem. However, there are those who are benefiting from that situation. There is less competition, and there is a wider market that is just consuming. But that weakens the economy because you have fewer people who are able to then, say, for instance, save, which then makes the economy rely on external loans. And when you do that, you are externalizing some of the great assets that we have as a country, which then leaves our future generations in trouble. So we are exporting our problems now by trying to fund it from money from the future. It's not going to work in the...
And just to clarify, you say some are benefiting. Who are you referring to as some?
Those that currently have the means of production, the capital means of production. What we can then venture to say crony capitalists, because they have free money from somewhere that comes as a result of their ability to amass influence or something like that. There are, for instance, certain businesses that have lived past their sell-by date, if you will, but because they piggyback on government, and they are supported by government social programs. They have lived up to this point, and they're becoming monstrous, and they are inhibiting competition for that reason, because they are being supported by a system that does not require any accountability from them.
And I noticed that you have been diplomatic. You're not specifying who exactly. Can I push you to mention which entities, even if you don't mention names of individual companies, but which industries are you saying are benefiting from this? Are you saying basically that it's those who are in the consumer industry, or I mean in the consumer space as opposed to manufacturing?
Well, when you see where most of the social programs are going, let's just take the example of the first lockdown. We did not have a wide distribution of the resources of that were at the time availed. Only a small motley crew of those that have access to those social programs from the supply side got to benefit. But they were benefiting from those that did not have, because government had to play referee in between to say, well, you don't have, you have, so let's take from you and give to this one. And by so doing, there was a transfer of wealth from the public purse to private hands in that instance. That's just one example. You've got motor magnets as an example. The amount of vehicles that we purchase every year sometimes don't even make sense, because we still have vehicles that are still functioning, that can still carry us around and stuff like that. So, but those are examples, and they are not wrong to, look into that opportunity and exploit it if we use the right language for it, because that's the whole point. If you've got a product and there's a need for it, you should supply that product, and you should be the one to get it. But in the broader sense of things, maybe it is too much for lack of competition. It makes it very difficult to compete in that space.
Okay.
Yes.
No easy way exists to capacitate and to align skills to industry. I think that is an obvious problem.
Yes.
How can we address that?
At this point, it is very difficult without a congruent plan. If we don't create something that brings everybody on board, it will be very difficult to do so, because then every time we are in silos, we have seen the impact of silos in our system. The impact of silos is lack of accountability, lack of delivery, and just lack of quality. And it is because everyone thinks that they know what they're doing. There's a story of 8 blind men who had to describe an elephant by touching it. And it was very interesting. And it sort of paints a picture of where we are, because we don't have a congruent plan. We don't have a developed ideology that we are all chasing, not only as individuals, but also as a country. We don't have singular values that we are chasing. Therefore, too many, you know what they say, too many hands.
The one at the trunk saw the trunk, the one at the tail saw a tail.
Yes.
And so on and so forth.
The one at the trunk saw a branch, and the one with the ear saw pate, the other one with the tail saw a rope. So we all think that we know what we are dealing with, which is true. We all think we know what we are dealing with, but we actually, the more we know, the less we know of what we are dealing with.
Since you were using metaphors, then we end up ignoring the elephant in the room, so to speak.
Basically.
Okay. Now, how do we then, since you are from the creative industry, I think that's one area where there could be some low-hanging fruit. How do we leverage the opportunity provided by the creative industry to spark entrepreneurship, to spark employment?
Well, firstly, we need to appreciate that other industries have peaked. The mining industry has peaked. Agriculture is struggling. If we go with the last SONA by President Masisi, he outlined certain numbers that I looked at and I was like, wow, this is really indicative of where we are as an economy. He mentioned that of the funding that was provided, I think it was in particular by CEDA, if I'm not mistaken there, but I want to believe it was CEDA. Between 53 and 57%, I don't know which of those two numbers, but it's around that range, of the funding went to services, and only about 7% went to manufacturing. So you can already see the sort of situation we are dealing with. If over 50% of your funding as a country, this is tax-provided funding. If that funding goes to services, it means you are merely consuming other people's products. That means you are creating jobs in those spaces. So it must worry us, because then we are skipping our creative students who are working out of college right now. We have many creative students, creative youth working out of college, university, who are now sitting and wondering what they could do, but it's because their job are systemically being taken away by us exporting the capital to other countries where those jobs are created. So we need to leverage that space and say, what is it? How can we turn this into our own advantage and actually start to export our story, our culture, our products? Because you go beyond just exporting their talents. You also have to include the culture story of Botswana, the businesses that are in Botswana. We know some of these great nations, not because we ever went to them, but because we watched a film, we read a magazine, and the next thing, we start behaving like them, we speak like them, we eat like them. You see how powerful the creative industry is. So we can export not just their talent, but we can export our culture itself. And it can be commercialized with the intention to monetize as we go along, and that will have a huge impact.
I don't know what you think about this. I was having a conversation with someone. I said, some things we can easily export is the notion of botu and how it applies, and also the quota system of alternative dispute resolution. Do you see any way that these sort of behavioral systems can be packaged and exported in the context of what you're talking about.
Absolutely, but we have to form an ideology to be able to export them. Democracy is an ideology. We bought into it. Someone sold it to us. Botu is an ideology. Situ is an ideology. I mentioned Situ because it encompasses Botu. And if we don't package them as an ideology, we won't sell them to anyone. Our greatest advantage right now is that we have managed to run generally a peaceful country. But we fight, and we mention it. We do fight. And we say in Tokolo Giamulo,
it's war.
That's war. And we are involved in it all the time. It's just our approach is different. So if we were to package that approach properly, perhaps we could sell it to the world and even set up the peace house here so that warring nations would come to this place and they get to sit at the table and say, look, we don't understand why you have to, but let's hear it. Surprise us and tell us what is it that is so large that you can't deal with it from talking. Because we can, we are here. 2019 elections showed us that we have the depth and the temerity to be able to hold ourselves back. It was a very tense election, and we all remember that.
Yes.
But
and lots of litigation arose from that.
Yes. But the one thing that kept coming was regardless of how you are feeling, remember this. This is where we are based as Botswana. And if we go beyond that, I don't know what we turn into.
Now, let's talk about more on solutions still. Increase market consumption. You're obviously somebody who's thought about this in terms of ideation, in terms of packaging ideas and wrapping them up. Can you give specific examples or instances in where you're involved or other people were involved where this was done successfully from Botswana? I'd like to think that there's something we've managed to do. It's not like all gloom and doom.
Absolutely. You run a plethora of businesses, and you know without consumption those businesses will not go anywhere. And to have a vibrant market that consumes products, you need to have vibrant jobs. So it's a case of the chicken and the egg. So when we came on board at GabsFM, when I was appointed as a station manager, the first address to staff, I said to them, unfortunately, I find a lot of power concentrated at the top, and we are going to devolve it. It was difficult in the beginning. It took over 18 months before the team could actually get it because they were used to top-down approach. And so they were afraid of making decisions, which made it very difficult and took long for us to get to the market quick with the right product. They took forever to formulate their own independent thoughts, to be able to challenge what management was saying, which is always quite a step back into history and goes against the idiom of they were struggling just generally with understanding business processes because there was so much secrecy. So they didn't even know how the media business worked. But when we started opening them up to that world, they started understanding even the impact of them just doing their work to the broader economy. And we kept repeating that to say, what you're doing here actually is affecting someone in Mau when you're in Gaborone, and you don't even know it. You're not even paying attention to it. But when you start to pay attention to it, you start taking your job a little bit more serious than you would have. So where we are now, we need to mobilize, and I use the word mobilize here because that's what we need, to mobilize our creative youth to become professional in their space. They need to begin to see themselves as professionals. They don't need walls, they don't need offices for them to be professional. They are professional because they understand the ethics, they understand what's expected of them. When we start demanding of them a return on our investment, we are a return on the investment of this country, this nation. You are a return on investment. Yes. So why can't we also hold them accountable? Yes. However, we need to show them, because with fewer and fewer jobs being produced by our industries, that means their chances of ever practicing and going beyond their soft skills and practicing them are almost non-existent. So we must create platforms like Action for Jobs, which is why Action for Jobs exists, to say, let's show you the professional way to do this. Let's show you the professional way to do production. Let's show you how to design a very solid production plan. Instead of you trying to wander, you know, and spend all the money you have maybe gotten from financing, and you spend it on learning, and then once you've learned, now you have the knowledge, you don't have the money. It's kind of a difficult situation. So we need to spend that.
What do you actually practically do in terms of Action for Jobs to address that? I think my listeners will want to know, what are we doing exactly? You know, people want to just see and imagine something that is tangible, to understand.
Yeah. Action for Jobs is basically a way to formulate a business ecosystem around the creative sector. There is a disconnect, and there's a reason why there's that disconnect between the creative sector and the business community, or the private sector, which has monstrous amounts of resources to help resource the creative sector. But two elements come to play. First of all, the private sector is driven by profit, and the creative sector has not managed to place itself in a space where the private sector can look at it twice and say, if I put my money into this, I'll get something in return. And the worst part is creatives still approach the private sector hat in hand, begging, without any qualification to say, look, if you put money into this, this is what you'll get in return. In fact, that language, they don't have it for the second reason. Creatives are creatives. They're not business people. And so you need to start having an appreciation, and the reason why we wanted to push it with GabsFM, even though I'm no longer there. The idea was...
Well, you just left recently.
Yes. GabsFM has shown creative youth that you can monetize content, because that's really what radios are about. You monetize content. You are able to turn your content into money and even hire more people. So the idea that we don't know how to monetize content is essentially a lack of skill to do so. So because we have that skill, that's what we are bringing on board, and we are saying creatives remain creatives, business remain business, but let's join the language, begin to understand each other. We understand what business wants, we understand what the creative world wants, and we are saying we are that bridge to make the two worlds come together.
And talking about the creatives, there is an organization called Cosmos.
Yes.
Is it winning? Is it fulfilling its mandate? And do you think that more could be done?
Well, it would be remiss of me to imagine that I know what they do exactly. I have a general idea, and I don't know if it's been effective. I'm very hard pressed to answer you on that one, because I have to be closer to the organization for me to know exactly how they operate. It was
specifically created to assist creatives, and the fact that somebody in your position doesn't fully grasp what it's about is problematic, isn't it? Well,
its system is not clear. So it's very difficult for me then to speak, because I don't know how it really functions. I have employed a lot of time. I've put a lot of time to try and understand it, because it was an institutional obligation on my part when I was still managing the radio station. But we still couldn't even agree on many things.
My understanding of it, from my perspective as a restaurant owner, is that if you're showing something on television, whether it's DSTV or what, sooner or later there will be a song from somewhere. Whether you play a radio or you invite people, there will be music in the background. And whether that musician is Pavarotti in Italy or whatever in America, you're playing it there. The local creatives, actually the argument goes, and I had a difficulty really accepting or synthesizing that argument. The argument is that as a restaurant, just for the mere fact that you have a TV set, You have to pay a certain amount based on the square meterage or the space that you occupy. What do you think of that setup?
That's why I say the system is not quite clear, and it's frustrating for that reason. You still can't even make sense of it. I couldn't, and I still don't understand, because to me a fairer system would pay on rotation, the number of times a song gets rotated, and you shouldn't be forced to pay for international acts, for instance, because they are not members of Cosbots. But you are not charged on rotation. You are charged on the fact that you just play the music. You
just the fact that you have a TV set that might just perchance have a music playing.
Yeah.
Even if it's news all the time, there's a chance that you might switch it to music.
Yeah. So then it becomes very difficult to understand how you're going to redistribute what you have collected, which is why then I say I don't understand that system.
Okay.
So I will not
Maybe I should
time.
invite, if they are watching, I should invite someone from Cosbot
Perhaps.
to really back themselves up. They come here and the nuggets.
I won't hold my breath.
Yeah. Okay, I know what you mean. All right. Now, economic impact. Can you give an idea, if we're to embrace this action for jobs?
Yes.
What will be the impact? Can you give us an indication, relating to time, in terms of timelines and deliverables?
Yes. Let me start first of all with the market validation of this thing. South Africa, the film industry, not the full creative industry, just the film sector of the creative industry, basically produces or adds to South Africa's GDP every year in excess of $400 million US. And by 2016, they had 25,000 employees in that sector. And by 2 years later, they had 30,000. Continental powerhouse, Nigeria, adds between 640 million US to 1.4 billion, depending on what you are chasing there. But those are astronomical numbers, just from creativity, just from films. And when you go to Hollywood, which is arguably the largest film industry in the world, I mean, they say that Hollywood, were it a GDP, it will be the fourth largest GDP in the world. You are looking at a contribution of at least 6.5% to American GDP year on year. That should make us sit and wonder, where are we going wrong in understanding this?
Before I talk about the population issues, what is the situation in Botswana now?
Well, we really don't have qualified numbers in that space because we don't have a film industry. So we need to build the film industry first, mold it, inculcate in it professional ethics that come from us learning from other sectors like the music industry. We see that
music industry has done very well.
Has done very well, but we still don't have the professional ethics that should reverberate across the whole sector of music. The film industry is an expensive industry to invest in. We have sent little money into that space. We have not really resourced it fully, and I can understand why. We have not qualified it for anybody to look at it and say, I can put money into this and I will get a return on investment. So we are involved in working to see at least the linkages within the value chain to be stabilized with the right processes before we can go and tell people, please put money in this. The onus is on the creatives themselves in the film sector to begin to take themselves a lot more seriously and create that whole network, the vibrant value.
How do you respond to the lazy argument? I'll call it a lazy argument. That our population is small, 2.3 million. Everybody tells you 2.3 million.
Yeah, Americans could say the same thing against the Chinese.
Yes, meaning the Chinese is 1.5 billion, Americans about 350 million.
They could say the same thing. That means they wouldn't be leading the world. They could say the same thing about the Indians. They could say this the same thing about the whole of Europe.
Okay, meaning that the population is irrelevant.
It's irrelevant. It's value that's most important.
Mm.
If what you are making and doing is valuable, you see, that's why I like free market politics, because people vote for your product with their token called money.
Okay, I hear you. Now, I want to inject in the Africa Free Trade, Africa Intercontinental Free Trade Agreement, AFTA. I don't know how to say it nicely. It seeks to bring down barriers, whether we're talking about trade barriers in the form of tariffs, non-tariff barriers, and to open things up for creatives. Yes, granted, as far when I last checked, Botswana had not ratified it yet, but I take it that we're in the process. Do you see any way that we can position ourselves in terms of the context of action for jobs to take advantage of the agreement, the free trade agreement?
Absolutely. For a very long time, we led in the area of diplomacy, and we have invested a lot in technical education, which across Africa is definitely needed at this point. We are technical managers by training. It's only now we are starting to invest in, but most people who walked out of University of Botswana can run international businesses. They can run international sectors. So they can walk into Zimbabwe right now. We can send 200 people into Zimbabwe. And I want to believe Zimbabwe will transform. Mm. So can we be able to do that with the current Africa that we have? I doubt. Mm. But it's utopia. Mm. It is...
It's aspirational.
It's aspirational. It's something that I believe Botswana have. Mm. However, in terms of our story, everybody wants to know our story. Mm. Everybody wants to know our story. Besides, the film industry on the continent is being ruled by two giants, South Africa and Nigeria. What are the advantages of both? We can learn from their mistakes. That is how you then position yourself. The Nigerians concentrated more on storytelling, and South Africans concentrated more on structure. They've structured their, as a result of SABC, they've structured their industry very well. So where can we come in? We can come in on pre-production terms, because they both are struggling with maintaining a very solid ideology like the Americans have managed to do. So that could be an area of focus for us to say, well, we can't do much about the population of Nigeria and them supporting their film industry, but what we can do is we can create a qualified story of what an African can be, because in South Africa, the African man becomes a king if he kills the whole neighborhood with drugs and carries guns around and kills his competitors. That's a story you see all the time being rehashed on television or in all the films that they create. Nigerians is just a bunch of women fighting to control the king. And in the process, there's juju.
Yeah.
But that's
the basic message.
But is that an African?
No.
No. So this is where we could utilize our late entrance into continental storytelling.
And inject something new.
Something new and different.
Wonderful, wonderful. Now, let's go beyond just the film industry in terms of spending on ancillary services. Yes. What do you have in mind there?
Absolutely. That's why we're calling for an ecosystem. We are asking for startups to be a part of this, because once what we are doing takes off, it must carry them. I tend to say, when the tide recedes, you shouldn't be found naked. So hold on to your pants. Yeah. So this is the time the tide has come closer to the shore. So don't let it go back without you. So we are forming smart partnerships with startups, with all the youth that are in the creative space. We are saying your resources are much more than enough actually when they all come together. And this is the opportunity that we are working on.
What is the spin-off that you see for the tourism industry, which is a very important pillar in Botswana?
it's amazing because Botswana has such amazing sites that can be film sites. Maramozo are shot here. We could take advantage of that. The Derek Jobeys of this world have been shooting in the Okavango for a long time. We have seen the incredible work in some of the wildlife channels, National Geographic and others. I didn't mean to mention brands in your podcast, but nonetheless, it's just a practice, a professional practice.
Yes.
But the point is, we have seen people see the value of telling stories from Botswana. But because we have not positioned ourselves professionally for them to go through us, I mean, a professional team coming from the US doesn't need to carry a crew to come here. They can come maybe just with their actors or the people they want to infuse into the story. And here the crew is ready, but the crew must be trained to understand how to behave in a professional setup.
Well, look at the Mogobe Nuggets of Wisdom. We have a film maker, he's not here now. We have a videographer. We have, the assistants. Already we're looking at 4 or 5 people being employed around a small show like this.
Yeah.
How do you see this as a microcosm spreading on a larger scale? In other words, can you paint the picture how things are going to look like when this action for jobs really take root?
When we started it, we had a term that we were going for, that in 18 months we would have raised 1,000 graduates. We had the resources, we had the influence, we just needed the support.
And when you started is when?
Last year, February, when we announced it, right?
Yes.
And then on the ground, we started putting boots. Because of COVID, we had to reorganize, but we started putting boots on the ground in August last year. And we went across the country to activate not just Action for Jobs, but we were also wanting to carry the business community to go with us to learn the impact of COVID from a market perspective, to say what is it that they need to learn. Maybe consumptions have changed, maybe markets have moved. So come along with us on a stimulus package tour, and let's get to hear, before you go and get your stimulus package, come and hear what the market is saying. So we piggybacked on that, and we also brought the message of Action for Jobs. Basically, Action for Jobs is saying this business ecosystem will benefit from these graduates, if you so to speak, this creative youth, when they begin to export their products, after being trained, after being mentored, after now understanding the professional etiquette that they require for them to perform at a very high level. Because this is very high level where you are, sir. I don't think that the people that come and do work here do sloppy work.
No.
They have to do, because you have branded yourself as someone who only deal with the best. So they won't come here playing, I'm going to try and see how this thing is going to work. But imagine, I see some of the productions on social media, and 5 marks for effort and for interest. But then you run short of the runway because you don't understand how to perform at a very high level. And that's what we are hoping that we'll close that gap at this point, to say, look, let's push you a bit so that you begin to understand how to work at a very high level. And in the process, you will be able to start seeing better stories being told that will attract businesses that will want to not only advertise, but to place their brands in there. They want to associate with the industry, because when it's lucrative, it makes sense. We are seeing it with brand influencers. They started off as people were laughing at, but they took it seriously because it was a professional thing. Look at where they are now.
There's a handful of them who are really doing very well.
Yeah, who are doing very well. So we can still do the same thing with the film sector, but there must be some form of sacrifice from the film sectors themselves. They can't keep saying and waiting, well, nobody's doing anything about it, so we are going to just sit here and wait and hope that things will sort themselves out.
They have to take the initiative.
They have to take the initiative. Nigerians started with camcorders. When they look at their productions now, where they come from, I think they want to bury their heads.
They just laugh about it, I'm sure.
But now they're laughing all the way to the bank.
Yes.
And Nigerians in the diaspora are now coming back into Nigeria with a better...
And just...
Yes.
what you just described has sprung a thought in my head that there was a time in Botswana, is it 15, 20 years ago, when it seems like every other graduate studied mass communication.
Yeah.
And there was an aggressive push for mass communication. So I'm just wondering, what happened to those graduates? We used to take people to Australia, to wherever. Mass communication was a drive as we were getting ready to launch BTV initially.
Yes.
What has happened in the last 2 decades with those people? And what can be done to revive them and to get them involved?
I love that question because it's very close to my heart. It's a matter of development. We stopped developing. That's what happened. When I resumed, I did when I assumed my position, not resumed, when I assumed my position as a station manager, I did a structural analysis, and I discovered that we had not been developing. Presenters, for instance, were not being developed. Before I was station manager, I was programs manager. And I went on a drive to bring new voices. I put a moratorium. We will not poach. And we spent 4 months of intensive training of voices that later made about 83% of GabsFM's voices. And we had more voices than any other radio station in the country. We had 32 voices, when regularly on radio you'd hear 14, about 13, 14 voices. We doubled that.
Wow.
And it was not even because we had money to do that. It was to say the industry is poorer, with fewer and fewer people being developed. And then when I was appointed station manager, we had an upward mobility of people who didn't even expect that they will manage. We raised people from within, and we got them to learn management, to learn media management.
And some of these people are people who had been sitting on their degrees.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. The ceiling was always, you are a presenter, you can go away and do whatever you are doing, wherever you've been doing it. But we broke that ceiling. We broke that ceiling even in the newsroom. We broke that ceiling even for young ladies. You know, you'd have someone in their late 20s or early 30s or thereabouts, because they are mostly young, breaking into management. And in the process, even more ladies. We had a very good balance between males and females in our system. But going back to your question earlier, the issue is development. We are not developing fast enough to meet the changing landscape, because development is a cost to most businesses. It becomes a cost. They don't see it as an investment. And that is where the disconnect is.
Let's talk quickly about innovation and civic engagement.
Yes.
Let's lump them together. What can you tell us about that in terms of the Action for Jobs model?
Yes, education is important. We call it civic engagement. This is us engaging with the civics. This is us preparing minds that there is a possibility at this point that we can have a change in dimension, a paradigm shift in how we've been seeing ourselves. Maybe it's a case of a madman, but maybe there's a lesson to learn from the madman. We don't know what the future holds. The worst thing to ever think is that we have reached the eschaton and we have managed to bring it in, and here we are, and it's a great utopia. It's impossible. We are here because of the ideas of brave men before us.
Sitting
brave
on
women.
the shoulders of giants.
Of giants. Brave women have stood and walked and dug, and they have put mortar on top of another brick. So we are learning to say, maybe we are stuck in the successes of the past, because maybe we are worried if we were to venture in our own space, we're going to be in trouble. But look at Rasengwatshe. He was a madman. He was a madman. Now, everyone is looking to him and say, wait, hang on. How did you manage to reorganize the agricultural value chain?
I've invited him to this show. I think we we are yet to publish his interview. Yes.
Yeah. So imagine now, the Ministry of Agriculture has no choice.
But
I mean,
to
like
take him
literally,
serious,
but
yeah.
to take him seriously and invite him and say, look, we've been wondering how can we maximize our value chain. And he says, well, I have a microcosm of a value chain. If you let me, I can help you.
Yeah, he talked on the show that people just emerged from the bush.
Yeah.
And he employed them, he skilled them, he tooled them.
It's the same model of
Yeah.
Action for Jobs, just slightly broader, because it involves a little bit more industries that can feed off the film industry. But the bottom line is, we should remember the Carnegies of this world. That it could have been just.
You're talking about the Scotsman who came and became very wealthy in America.
Yeah,
the steel baron.
Yeah, it could have been just a train. It could have been just steel, but he saw a whole industry. You understand?
Yes.
And we can do the same thing with Ford. We can do the same thing with Rockefeller. I'm mentioning those names not because there are no other names to mention, but those are the ones that are easily remembered. When you mention them, sort of many people understand. But they managed to industrialize those sectors. And when you talk about industry, you are just talking about industrializing. That is what Rasengwatshe has done. He's industrialized agriculture. He's gone beyond commercializing it. It's a whole industry. And I saw him the other day. He was saying he's managed to raise 3 million pula to put it into a feed system.
A farm, a feeding system.
Feeding system.
Yes.
That's crazy. That is an idea out of the loony bin, but it's working.
Yes.
Maybe we need a few crazy.
And now
men.
he's brought in the ministries.
Yes.
He's brought in several ministries.
They have to.
There are 3 or 4 of them now who are saying, look, let's replicate this, let's help you.
They have no choice. They have no choice because that train, once it leaves the station,
It's gone.
it's gone. And I mean, we already have instances. There's another story of a youthful business person who's managed to break into Rwanda with products that were rejected here. So we can't keep missing the opportunity at government level. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah, let's just wrap it up, the discussion talking about leadership in action, because you touched on it. Leadership is key. Just tell us what your thoughts are, because often when you talk about leadership, we're thinking of political leadership, but I think you have a much broader perspective.
Absolutely. Leadership starts with the self, and it starts with you managing to follow. If you will not follow anybody, you will not lead anybody, because here we are doing that in action. You speak, I keep silent, I want to hear you, I'm now following you, you are leading. I speak, you keep silent, and you want to follow. So if you are not able to understand that at that level, at the personal level, you are not ready to run anything. You are not ready to lead anyone. And that is a critical component of understanding how systems operate, because I like what former President Khama once said. I don't know if it was his original quote, but he said, you see, you need to understand that your right ends at my, it ends at your nose, basically. You know, if I swing a punch at you, I have every right to do so, but it shouldn't touch you. So it takes a lot of discipline, which is something that leaders should have. A lot of discipline to know how far is far and when to stop. And lastly, the thing that drives a leader is an ideology. If you don't have one, you will not do much as a leader. You need an ideology. You need to chase that ideology. And your ideology should be so simple that those who are following you should be able to understand it, because it becomes the true north. When all of you are lost, you go back to the ideology and say, well, this is where we started, and this is why we are here. And I think the Christians call it the first love. You know, what was the thing that brought you in the first place?
Some call it purpose, some call it, dream, whatever it is that the true north is.
Yes.
All right, we've come to the end of our conversation. It went very fast, you get to ask me a
It
question.
was fast, yeah?
Yes, because we're engaged.
Yes.
That's why.
Yes.
One question.
Well, I will ask for many. How has it been to get here for you? And what are the challenges you had to overcome? And they could help someone who's probably looking up to you.
Yeah, it's I've answered this question in previously, but it's been a roller coaster. Obviously, we'd like to think that although it was a roller coaster, it had an upward trajectory. And there have been times when it looked like all gloom and doom, very depressing. But I think that the message that should come out of my story when I get to write it will be persistent pace. I know that Ramahan has already written a book, The Magic of Perseverance. But that is very, very true. It's been a roller coaster ride, but in a positive upswing. And it's a journey that, looking back, I can tell where the critical upshoots were. And the funny thing is that all the critical upward mobile changes occurred when we had the biggest challenges, when we had the biggest trouble.
Where you were challenged?
Yes, where we were challenged the most. So my thinking is that even in the context of this COVID, I'm constantly asking myself, where are the opportunities? Where are the value adds? What can we pick? Where is the COVID dividend? So it is that kind of mentality which is based on the Christian faith and also the Tswana culture. Remember earlier I told you that we have the two strongest things, assets, that perhaps we underscore, which is the Kota system of dispute resolution and dispute handling, and then the other is Botu. We need to constantly package those things and take, for instance, if we take our idioms are so rich. So sometimes when things are really rough, I say to myself, when things are really tough, I say to myself, when things are really tough, I find some idiom, some saying as a Tswana, And I even remember when my dad used to tell me that, those kind of
That's
things.
everybody.
Yes.
I went through that.
Yes.
I had that sort of parenting.
That was very, very good. Where a beating was administered because you came late. In my case, there was a time when I came late, even from the library. The rules is a rule. You come when it's dark. It doesn't matter where you are from. So that kind of strong discipline.
So
has
nobility,
really
basically.
Yes.
Nobility.
Yes.
Yeah.
When you say nobility, I'm a noble by birth.
Yes.
Yes. Since my father died, I took over that role. Just that I had to have someone take over in my absence. So I hope I've answered your question in a very convoluted manner.
It's perfect.
Yes.
It's perfect.
Yes.
Like anything can be perfect. Yes. Yes.
Thank you.
No,
Now,
thank you.
look at that camera.
Oh, yes.
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 You're going to talk to that person and leave them with something inspirational, something powerful, something they can take home. And then after you do that, you give them your contact details.
All right. Well, life is an adventure, and that is really the true calling of life. And you can decide to live it chained to your fear, or you can decide to break free of your mind, because that's the true prison that we struggle to break from. We take it wherever we go. But sometimes you need to push back the darkness in front of you. You need to push back against all the snakes you are afraid of inside the bottomless pit that you imagine is beneath you, and create relationships. One of the key schools of thoughts about leadership that I've come to appreciate is friendship before function. Create friendships. This transactional behavior is not going to take you far. So take time, be patient with yourself, and look, love yourself a bit more, especially, and this is not in any way meaning racism or I'm being racist at all, but the black child. Look, you come from behind, but you have overcome so much. You have overcome systemic colonialism. You have had to learn a whole language by force. You had to go to schools that were telling you this is an English-only zone. you know, things like that that are part of the system, but here you are, and you are now competing at a global level. Don't underestimate what you have done. My father once said to me, and I think I remember those words all the time. He said, you know, I'm surprised by your generation. Here we are, we're a generation that built a whole university, but we're never going to use it because we are the uneducated. But then you are educated from that university and you can't complete a bridge. That was a very powerful challenge to me. And I hope it will be a powerful challenge to you as well as you set out. If you want to find out more about Action for Jobs, if you want to be a part of it, we are looking for creative youth of all kinds, whatever you have. We don't have a barrier except we just want you to be creative and get to learn how to do so at a professional level. We are very much fired up, we're fueled up to see to it that the stories that Mogobe is talking about, those idioms are not going to tell themselves, they are not going to package themselves. The world will never know about them unless we package them. And that's the whole point of us putting together the film sector and pushing for this culture story to be at the forefront of, and to be the ideology, the leading, the North Pole for Botswana's film sector. That's where we are. You can find us quickly. You can send us an email, info@actionforjobs.net. That's info@actionforjobs.net. That's where we are. And to the business community, we are building a whole ecosystem around this project. You will get your return on investment. Talk to us as well. Be a part of this. And thank you very much for your audience. And with now, I'm handing back to you.
What is your access number in terms of maybe WhatsApp that they can reach you? I'll give it to them.
Okay.
The number is 73374054. Gabriel Rasengwatshe.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I really appreciate this moment, Mogobe, for the one that you've given us.
It was a pleasure.
Thank
you.
you.
Were a wonderful guest.
Here we go.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay.